Unmute. Oh, that's me. What's up? Hope everybody's doing good. Mallory Woods,
Hey,
Rich Chou, three martial arts nerds hanging out with you guys. A bunch of people hopping on. Thanks for coming in. If you're listening to this, hopefully it's within 24 hours of when we hung out and chatted. It'll be on all podcast forums. We just started hanging out and talking about martial arts and doing our thing, and breaking the rules because there shouldn't be overly structured rules. Mal is a lifelong martial artist. So is Rich Chou. Rich, what's that? Wimp to warrior. We've talked about it. We'll talk about it more.
Yeah.
Mallory was a point karate competitor, and we're just hanging out talking about martial arts. Before I go over some list of nebulous topics, who's got what to say today? Anybody?
Well, hey, you know what? There's a great topic right there.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I did. I got a haircut. I did. So yeah, if you're listening to audio, the question was, did you get a haircut? I did, and it looks fantastic. I think. How are you, Rich?
I'm doing great. Episode number 3. I believe it's officially a streak, right? Is that right?
That is a streak.
At least 3 to get a streak going. So we got that going for us, which is nice. Feeling good, feeling the flow.
Yeah. We take questions. We'll be having guests. This is just, no unstructured, open chat. But we did write down a few things we've been thinking about. This idea of the best in the world. Now that'll connect to these next 2 things. Best in the world, in quotes, notice. Pound for pound, this is a myth. I wrote myth right in the thing because this is a myth. It's a mechanism. It's a mechanism for debate. We used to say somebody was amazing. Then we'd say they were incredible. And then we said they had great talent. And then this guy is one of the greatest. And now you're either the greatest of all time or nobody gives a shit.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about these things. Rich has been reading one of Hickson's books and sent us a great quote we're going to talk about. I'm going next week to commentate Jorge Masvidal's Game Bred MMA, which is a bare knuckle mixed martial arts. We'll talk about that. And maybe first, before we go anywhere, I put this in quotes because this is Rich's quote. I remember at Bellator shows, which I've worked a lot in the past and I will work plenty in the future. Rich was the senior matchmaker or the vice president of matchmaking or something. Rich is still involved with Bellator. But I would see him at weigh-ins, and he'd say, "Man, it's the weirdest ritual in sports. A bunch of guys without shirts on, standing and posing at each other." Right, Rich?
Yeah, absolutely. Now I think we were hanging around, standing around, chatting, and because the official weigh-ins now happen in the morning.
Yeah.
And the ceremonial for the photo ops and whatnot, it's more of a media function, happens later in the afternoon with fans and whatnot. And I think I was kidding around. Like, here we are waiting for a bunch of guys to get on a scale in their underwear.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that brought up a number of different aspects related to that. It's not a bad place to start today. I don't consume the fighting news very much because mostly it's like, dude broke his teeth, and then we'll just talk about that for like a week. Or Logan Paul did something, and then we'll talk about that. But in passing, I picked up that, and you guys tell me if you've seen this, where the story is, that Nick Diaz was sort of like, "Hey, Robbie Lawler, we both weigh probably like 188 or 190 pounds. Why don't we just fight at 185? Is this a thing? Has this been happening?
Yeah, that's happened. Apparently, Robbie just, he's not a man of many words. He does his talking in the cage, as we all know. He's good with it. He just wants to fight. So yeah, that's a thing. The weight class was changed the week of the fight.
Wow.
Yeah.
And both guys agreed on it.
Yeah. So listen to this. So for people at home, this is one of these things that's talked about extensively all the time, but like nobody actually understands it. People are like, well, how much weight would this person cut? Weight cutting, how much weight do you want to cut to drop a weight division? Weight loss is something everybody understands. Do a lot of cardio, reduce your calories, a bunch of ways you can lose weight. Weight cutting is a trick you play on your body to weigh less for a tiny window so you can do the weirdest ritual in sports in the morning and or pretend to do it in the afternoon. Older OG type fighters, things like weight classes are just nonsense. What does it matter what class we're in? That's there for the promoter to be able to make a list. We just want to fight each other. we both weigh closer to 185 than we do 170. Why don't we just fight? And I think it sounds like that's what they're going to do.
Yeah, and we spoke about this perhaps maybe the last episode actually about a sport, right? How fighting is not a sport. If we remember the origins of this, there were no weight classes, right?
Yeah.
It was open weight, no rules. And rules were created in large part for safety, for regulation, to make it a sport. Mm-hmm. But at its core, it was fighting. Fighting was its own thing, but let's regulate it. We need to make it safer. How do we do that? The implementation of weight classes, right? So yeah, Robin, you're right. It's, this wasn't always the case. This is a very this is something to create rules, make it safer, make it a sport. So promoters
easier to sell, easier to package.
That's right.
Yeah. And neither Robbie Lawler nor Nick Diaz care about you packaging stuff or selling stuff. They want to fight each other and get a paycheck for doing so.
Absolutely. Yeah. Those guys are throwbacks. They're a rare breed.
While we're on weigh-ins, did anybody see in Russia, of course, no offense, I've been to Russia a lot and I love going to Russia, and the Russian people are not like anyone thinks they are on television. They're not cartoon characters, they're people. But did anyone see the Russian weigh-in where the guy flying kneed the other guy?
Oh, no, I missed this.
Yeah, in the face.
I caught that.
Face. Yeah, Mal, if Mal searches for it, he might not only be able to find it, but drop it in here. By the way, Rich, we can drop video in. Within a couple of weeks, we'll be dropping in video and analyzing moments and stuff. You did catch that. Rich, let's say you are at a weigh-ins and that happens. What do you do? You've never seen that of hundreds of weigh-ins you've worked.
I've been at several weigh-ins. I've been in the center, kind of dictating, controlling the distance and the action there. And I've never seen anything that egregious. Usually the guy will kind of try and sneak around. Yeah. But yeah, to just walk right up. And then there was also the Canelo Plant.
Yeah. Right. I did see that.
Yeah.
I had that up, Robin, if you want to show it.
Right. Is this
you have the flying knee, Mal?
Yep. Got the flying knee. Let's get
this. And if you're listening on audio, I apologize, but here it is.
All right, here we go.
So,
boom.
Oh, jeez. So if you can run that again, I don't know if you can zoom in on it, but if not, hopefully people. There it is. Oh, that egregious, Rich. Good word.
Oh, man. I'll say this. I don't know what happened after that. I don't know if the fight happened and what happened, if they did fight. But, man, you don't get paid for that.
No.
You could have just blown, just not. Should have saved that for the next day. But
so
I don't know the backstory either. So
no, true. So yes, that is 100% true. But also, the next day when we are paid to fight, he will be expecting me to throw strikes at him. Whereas currently, when I walk up, I might be able to get, of all the possibilities that guy's thinking, what he isn't thinking is something comes from this direction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So dick move. But yes, Canelo Plant. There's a breakdown on my Instagram and YouTube. I went and got into it. Dana White, I like Dana, and I get along well with him. He also says things for many reasons, including promoting his own thing. And I don't always agree with what he says, because many of them have purposes, which promoters say stuff. But I did notice that he was like, "That's stupid. Where is everybody?" And you do look and you're like, there's nobody on stage with these two athletes who just walk up to each other and everybody's looking at them and they're standing there. That was really dumb.
You could lose your event that way. I mean, what if he broke his hand? What if he swung and one fighter broke his hand?
One guy's cut.
Boom. Then fights off. Nobody gets paid. A lot of people more than the fighters depend on that paycheck, and it very well could happen.
Yeah, to take it a step back to what happened in Russia, the flying knee. Unwritten rules. That one where, hey, it's the weigh-in, pal.
Yeah.
That was a cheap shot. You don't do that. I don't know. Just
So if you're just kind of hanging out with us today and you weren't a week ago, Unwritten Rules in air quotes was one of our things. What do we kind of sort of agree not to do? And among that is like cost each other our paycheck by doing something stupid or cut each other or whatever. But unwritten rules, you do get the choice to disregard them if you are that type of combatant, and they're unwritten for a reason. You have not signed an agreement for them, but yeah, interesting stuff. We'll play around with some other stuff. I am doing commentating Jorge's Bare Knuckle MMA. We'll talk about that. Oh yeah, Rich, you sent us a quote. So tell us about Hickson's book and what jumped out at you about this.
I picked up Hickson's book. It arrived very recently. I jumped right into it immediately. I'm enjoying it tremendously. And let me just pull it up. What I sent you guys, what I found fascinating would be a great topic for us to discuss. And here we are. And, it's Hickson here talking about, coming up in jiu-jitsu and then getting ready to enter into his first Vale Tudo fight. And his quote is, "Today, it is possible to get a jiu-jitsu black belt without knowing self-defense or even getting into a real fight. This was impossible during the 70s and 80s.
Yeah. I mean, no, very cool. Yeah. Okay. Man, I'm going to order that immediately. Danny Cook, Danny Crook, thanks, man. This is going to be a blast. I promise. So think about that. It's scary, actually, when you think about it. And scary, not scary like the world's going to end, but scary when some things like this feel important to you. When I got a black belt in Taekwondo in my low teens, I think I weighed 110 pounds, and I could kick grown men in the head and stuff, but I don't know that, I would have considered myself a black belt compared to that line of thinking Hickson's talking about. So we saw that take place in Taekwondo, karate, and many other martial arts in certain areas of it, where 9-year-old kids have black belts, soccer mom who only trains once a week but paid on, and no judgment against soccer moms or little kids or anybody, but people who aren't combat ready can achieve the black belt by taking every test. So this has been a part of the watering down of martial arts as it becomes a business. So it only makes sense that to some degree, this will be part of jiu-jitsu's path.
Yes. When I put it in the context of, where they were at the time of growing jiu-jitsu, they were there they had to prove it was effective. You're right. It was really to promote, this was, I think, a really good way to prove its effectiveness. I mean, when you look back at what the early UFCs were and the choice to put Hoist in there, it was almost like this infomercial for Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, right? Mm-hmm. How, he wasn't even the best in the family, but he was the right one to go out there and show you how effective this art was. And I think, there's something to be said about Hickson saying that, about how they were getting Gracie Jiu-Jitsu going, even in Brazil at that time, and how they had to prove its effectiveness. So, look, I'm sure it was also rooted in we believe in what we're doing. And this is, I believe it wasn't just a business move. I mean, their fighting spirit in that family, even to this day, it's the family business, right? It's fighting. But I do think it was kind of both things coming together to achieve this goal of getting their art global, which obviously has happened. They've done
successfully. This can bring up a really interesting point. I commentate for Karate Combat, and you guys probably saw this. Mal, you'll have some thoughts on this. And I think we touched on it in our first podcast. The guy who won the gold medal in karate was the guy laying semi-conscious on the ground. Because a guy who ended up with the silver knocked him out, made him incapable of fighting with a controlled technique, which is the thing, but he resulted in being knocked out. And so he won the gold from his back. And we were talking about how ridiculous that is. And it takes you to a very interesting place, right? Jiu-jitsu, when you remove punching, becomes a little artificial, like Aikido, which was once a real martial art with some real application. To this day, it has some real application. Once it becomes just the Aikido nonsense, it becomes silly, even though there's some actual root to it. But that's an inevitability if we don't want you to get hurt. And I think the perfect example, because we can say point karate, Mal, you did point karate. We can say it's somewhat silly because we're not hurting each other. So before I go to my example, Mal, what's your thoughts on this part of it?
So one of the things that people do, they talk about that, and like it allows you to definitely get in a flow state of sparring. And there is heavy hitting. When you're dealing with speed and you have limbs, technically controlled limbs flying around, people are going to get hit. They're going to get knocked out. The gloves are at best 4 ounces, at the absolute best. But people do get knocked out. But it also allows you to be able to Ninja Turtles Cup. It allows you to you can spar every weekend. You can fight Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and still go to work Monday and hone those techniques that when you need to add power, you can.
Yeah. So there was a kid I commentated in karate combat and analyzed, and literally he was doing exactly what you do in point karate, only with full contact, which is the perfect example. And he won that fight. When I was commentating Taekwondo in Russia at the time, they were doing touch and they were stopping to review. So if the toe touched the cheek or did not touch the cheek, you could hold up a thing and they would review to see if it touched, and you got your 4 points for your spinning hook kick with a toe that touched or did not touch. It became ridiculous. Then later they added a protector with an electric, that registered it, but only a certain power would register. And then you would score or not score. So the Mexican team at the Pan Am Games started using lots of straight punches, ended up winning. So it's shaped the martial arts. But as you go down this road where, wait a second, which to start with where Rich started, Hickson was like, you can become a black belt without even fighting. It starts to get weird. But then as I explored this idea sort of as thought process where this ends up, I realized it ended up at fencing, which is a beautiful combat sport, incredible combat sport. But we fence to train to be fencers so we don't have to stab each other.
Right.
Because you can't train sword fighting very well. So we have to develop a way to do it. And that's where I was like, well, fencing makes sense because we can't stab each other or we won't even be able to train it. And at some point, that is true of fighting. We can only train so much until Mal gives me brain damage and I can't do it anymore. Do you know what I'm getting at?
I have a question that kind of goes in that, or rather, here's a topic, and it may spurt off into its own topic, but I've seen this more with some jiu-jitsu schools. I've seen and I've talked to some instructors of Taekwondo schools or other martial arts schools that this has happened to. So this is a guy on the street type of story. The guy on the street comes in and says, hey, you're not teaching real deal, and I'm going to challenge you on, you're there teaching 9 and 10-year-olds. But I've definitely seen it in jiu-jitsu schools where a guy comes in and just boom. And I was thinking, like, this has got to be set up. I'm like, no, this actually happens.
The internet's full of bodybuilders getting choked out by purple belts.
Exactly. I mean, that's their first lesson. It's free, isn't it? So, they wake up and know what happened.
I'll pass this over to you, Rich, with a thought, and that is one of the greatest aspects of jiu-jitsu compared to all of these other examples, sword fighting, is we can do it at full capacity and still go back the next day. Whereas we can't do that with boxing, and we certainly can't do that with sword fighting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the layers of the beauty of this art. Like you said, you can do it every day. You're not limited in that regard. But man, what a it's just one of those old school takes, because obviously Hickson's given black belts to people that haven't fought, right? Yeah. But it's just one of those old school rituals that we look back on, and back then it was different. It was more hardcore. It was, they were the pioneers. They had to prove that this thing worked, show the world it worked, and maybe in some ways prove it to themselves as well, right? They were studying was the real deal. And if that were the rule and the tradition today. I mean, I don't think you'd have as many black belts. You know, there's so many, not just in jiu-jitsu, but in every art of people that forget fighting. Some don't even compete, which is fine. I'm not criticizing anybody. It's just when you earn it,
Frozen?
you earn it.
Oh, sorry.
Different category. You know, there's different ways to earn a black belt. But if the standard today would be whatever art you're in, the final step is a fight. Martial arts would look a lot different, huh?
Yeah, there'd be a lot less black belts in the world too. So, Rich, I'm thinking of a particular type of martial arts fighter, professional fighter.
Okay.
And it's a prototype, and one of them comes to mind, and you signed him. So I'll ask you how much time you spent with him, because I know. So there's this particular prototype of professional fighter. They love training. They love developing. They love pushing themselves. They love the process, and they don't necessarily love cage fighting on television. Mm-hmm. But they do it because, one, that allows them to live the lifestyle, and two, the guy I'm about to give you that I'm going to ask you about told me this specifically. I also fight because I need to prove that there is worth and truth in what I'm training. So Mandel Nallo, most people won't necessarily know this guy's name. Some will. He's a Bellator fighter. At least that's the last place I've seen him fighting. Yeah. I haven't spoken to him. But he's somebody where I was in the gym with him and Fun Size Zach and a bunch of, and Eamon Zahabi, and they have this little crew of killers over at TriStar, and they're all the same, they're somewhat similar. They're like, we are martial artists, we love to live this lifestyle, and we must fight, one, because it lets us be martial artists, and two, because we have to know what we're doing is real and it works.
Yes. Oh man, Mandel, what a character.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Chatting with him, and I'm not surprised he has that approach. Just to give you guys a little background information, you know, his nickname is Rat Garbage.
Yeah.
Look at that. He's an interesting dude who has been around, you know, Rory McDonald, George St. Pierre, as you mentioned, TriStar 5. He's been around some really amazing guys, and you know, but his own individual, and has kind of created, this is his path. This is what he's chosen. He's like, I'm not like all you other guys in the gym. This is my journey, my path. And for him to say that, I think I'm not surprised one bit. He is a type of guy that I think he fights for a different purpose, just like everybody else does. Mm-hmm. You know, some guys are fighting to make as much money as they can. Some guys are fighting to be a world champion. Some guys are fighting to find out who they are. Some guys are fighting to find certain truths, and you know, they all kind of intersect in some ways. Mm-hmm. But yeah. Is what I'm doing and what I've dedicated my life to, is this the real deal?
Yeah, I know. What a beautiful thing that is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that nickname.
No joke, dude.
I love that nickname. Yeah. That is awesome.
Yeah, he's a legit cat. But their whole crew, Louis too. Louis, I forget, Sandinakis. They're a great crew of sort of martial arts. They're kind of TriStar's next wave guys, although they have been for long enough that they're TriStar's current wave guys. But yeah, they Zach, Fun Size Zach, what is his last name again? He was the Bellator champion for years. Yeah. Zach, God, I love Makovsky.
Yes.
Same thing. Yeah, they are all like, hey, fighting kind of sucks, and that comes down from George. Because George will say that publicly. He said it to me in a documentary. They said it many times over the last number of years. Fighting's hard. It's scary. It sucks. It's painful. It's tough. It's pressure. It gives you a lot of anxiety. But if you're a martial artist, it is part of the path, or a particular line of path. Some become teachers and searching for wisdom, and there's many things in martial arts. But in the young martial artist path, often fighting has to be a part of it. And yeah, it's a beautiful part. It's a terrifying part.
Yeah, you're right. And just to build off that, your martial arts identity, or your identity in this world of fighting, right? It's a guy like George strikes me as number one martial artist, and probably number two sportsman, and then he might be fighter. I've never. We touched on
Five will be fighter.
We've never he's never identified like I'm just a fighter. Whereas other guys, you're like, oh, he's a fighter first. He's not even a martial artist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's not who he is. That's not his identity. So yeah, it's that's interesting, and that's great because it's not everyone's different. Not I'd be bored if I think we all would be if just everyone was the same and just rolled out of a factory.
Yeah.
All have the same mindset and values and identity, right? It's great that some of these guys think martial arts is a bunch of mumbo jumbo. I dig that. That's cool.
Yeah, I do too.
Go and prove why what you're doing is better.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So, and that's one of the roots of what made us go, let's get together and chat and bring in other people who think like us. It's like that factory element that is starting to be what you see in the corporate sport fighting world is part of what motivated us to explore other things. That's what we're trying to avoid. And the factory element comes about when it's like, we got two guys, we got the same camera angle, they're going to walk out, we're going to say the same things, they're going to fight in the same spot with same cuts, and then at the end someone will do this, and so like that repetitive factory element I don't think is a part of that. Takes away from the creative elements of arts, right? But this Mario here mentions you notice that fighting teaches to close the distance quickly. Yes, it also teaches you to flee the distance quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Also teaches you to avoid. I think what we see from the great payoff of point fighting is the moving away from grappling, is to evade somebody grabbing you. I think that's been the biggest element that we've taken from that area. It's cool that Wonder Boy can pop in and strike you, flee, and then change a distance and strike again in the same phrase. But it's even more important to the grand scheme of how people are fighting today, I think, to be able to get away without
Mm-hmm.
Khabib trying to grab you.
Yeah.
Right. To be able to flee out of the range without Khabib trying to grab you.
Well, that engage, disengage philosophy. It's when you, and it's funny because when you only train that, if you're only doing point, it becomes so natural that explosiveness, you expect that explosiveness and you expect that evasion, or someone cuts an angle off it to your left or your right, depending on which side you have and everything. And it becomes, like, for example, if you're expected to do a 25-minute fight, swinging at air is going to get tiring so quickly. And if someone comes in, they pop you a few times and you want to load on you and you get nothing but air, that's going to get old. And then that's going to cause you to hold your techniques. That's going to cause you to not fire right away and everything. But of course, most people, like you said, Rich, will go back to the guys that are fighters first. All I need is one. I just want to hit him that once.
Hit him hard one time.
Hit him hard.
Robin, you had a great take on this, on how karate today, and who would have thought this in 2021, karate is a more complicated puzzle to deal with than jiu-jitsu. And when we bring up these examples of, Wonder Boy, MVP, Raymond Daniels, Machida, that in and out,
mm-hmm.
Come and try and clinch with me. You might get knocked out on the way in. Mm-hmm. And even when there's not a ton of action, just the feints and that engage, squaring up with someone, getting within range, it's nerve-wracking. And so like you said, Mallory, over the course of 15, 25 minutes, can you maintain that focus for that long, or are you going to get caught? And when do you shoot in? How do you set this up?
There's what you just said something and it triggered like, how long can you stay that concentrated too?
Yeah.
We always talk a lot about, gas tank, like, he's getting tired. You get exhausted engaging your focus that heavy. It's mentally exhausting, and physically exhausting as well. That's an element.
You brought that also triggered another thing. I was listening to Michael Bisping. I think this might have been on his podcast. He says, don't you think that the mental, having to stay focused, everyone's like, watch his left hand, watch his rear leg. Maybe they've got a sharp weapon there you have to watch out for. But you got to do that for 25 minutes as you're avoiding everything else, and then you get tired. He said he remembered clearly one time that he panned past the cameraman in his line of sight, and his focus stayed on that cameraman for just a split second. And then there's a foot coming at him, and how just that brief second You lost concentration and you could lose consciousness.
Yeah, it's crazy. All of that. So just focus is, we can talk all we want about how you counter a left hook,
Mm-hmm.
but that doesn't matter if we don't understand how we deploy focus. And there's so much we can take from watching a fight or seeing a great painter or musician or whatever. But we're not all trying to learn how to fight, right? Like, we don't all have to know how to defend a triangle. It may be helpful somewhere in life, but we're trying to see what these high performers, what aspects, what is making Michael on that night, or AJ McKee on whatever night, so special that we can do in life. Because it isn't the hand speed that made Canelo slip and do that. It was the way he can see and move, the way he can allow himself to move. So if we don't understand how to deploy, just when we go to watch Lawler and Nick Diaz, we'll say striker, this guy's striking, this guy's a jiu-jitsu black belt, whatever. What matters more than that is how focused are they? How are they able to take sometimes a broad focus and take in what your hand is doing over here and what the big picture is? Sometimes an overhead focus where they can see the relationship in space. Sometimes slow the frames down to such a degree where you see the guy blink. This is something that happens at a high level. George St. Pierre, anybody who's reached mastery, they'll talk about executing a movement or a choice during your blink. They'll talk about, in jiu-jitsu, this happens a lot. I'm sure, Rich, this is something that crosses your mind a lot. At brown belt level, sometimes you're aware of it, sometimes you're not. But you're doing things on people's exhale, right? Mm-hmm. You'll make a movement towards their exhalation. That is a blurring and sharpening of focus, to be capable of making a choice of how you're going to tighten a body triangle around me in such a way that when my breath comes out. And that's focus, right? And focus is a tool that we're training, and it's applicable to podcasting. It's applicable to filming movies. It's applicable to everything.
Absolutely. And focus when you're tired, when you're hurt, things aren't going your way. It's that's kind of the X factor, I think, for a lot of guys and their success. Fascinating
Robin,
to dissect.
You mentioned this before, Robin, that betting on fights is a fool's game, because you're saying that well, this guy brings this to the table, this guy brings this to the table, we're going to get the answer tonight. And you mentioned something I never thought about. Okay, what happened during training? What happens if this guy got a call right before the fight went on that something happened to his best friend? Or, can you perform on an emotional level? I think one of the things that I remember seeing, Brett Favre lost his dad the Sunday before a Monday night game. And all of his teammates would understand perfectly, hey, you want to go home and be with your family? It's your dad, and he chose to play. And he goes out and has a ridiculous game. He's throwing the ball everywhere. He got a bunch of touchdowns. And the camera's on him the entire time. We want to see how he's going to react. And there will be times he's breaking down on the sidelines. The guy just lost his dad. But then he goes out on the field and he just plays out of his mind and comes back and sits down. And guys are giving him space. And where he brings it back to what has just been lost.
Crazy.
What happened before the fight that we don't know about that will affect the fight?
So I'm going to tell a quick story. Mark Hominick fought Jose Aldo for the UFC featherweight title here in Skydome in Toronto. I think it was 160,000 people or something.
It was
were there.
Ridiculous number.
Yeah, it was crazy. And so the man in his corner, his name was Sean Tompkins. Did you ever meet Sean, Rich? Sean
Yes.
Tompkins? Yes. Sean was a friend, and most anybody who met Sean loved Sean, because he was a one-of-one, really fascinating character. Came down from Boston. But to Mark Hominick, Sean was his coach, his mentor, the best man at his wedding, and a father and a brother. Like, this is the relationship this guy had, far beyond martial arts in life. And he passed away. and he died. I actually saw him. I saved it for many years, the text that he had sent me that night, because I was commentating with Mark Bocek. It was a text about how good I looked and how bad Mark Bocek looked. But that was Sean's sense of humor. Mark looked great. It was just how Sean was. So he died the next day. And they were on, Mark was golfing at a big golf tournament when his friend called him and said that, and I don't think I'm stepping out of turn. I believe Mark has told this story outside of just telling me as a friend. And his friend called and said, Sean died. And Mark, and of course this is different than fighting, or playing football but Mark went about, he was surrounded by press because it was a press golf tournament. And that day he went and he golfed. And he didn't say anything, and he golfed. And I asked him about it, and he said, I don't know, somehow I compartmentalized it. I was gonna deal with that after I got away from all this press. I couldn't break down. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want them all freaking out. I found out, and he just compartmentalized it. Now that happened because of many reasons, but because of how mentally focused he was through fighting and all of these things. But you telling me that story reminded me of that. All day long, the closest person outside of your mother or your closest family member died, and you just set that thing aside and stored it for later. And that some might think that sounds cold, or that Brett Favre played football and think it sounds cold, but it's not cold. It's a weird type of ability to control or release or focus your own thinking.
Yeah.
Freaky,
Yeah,
it's very freaky.
I mean, sometimes we can put, like you said, compartmentalize, put things in there to sort out later, and God bless if you can, because being able to withhold an emotional reaction like that is tough in itself.
Yeah, for sure. Let's go to a few other. Oh yeah, this was one. So we were chatting about things, for people hanging with us. We have tried not to talk as much in between podcasts, because when we would chat about these things, they were fun and stimulated our own thoughts. So we'd be like, let's talk about that on the podcast. And one of them was, and this is something that comes up a lot. And I'm not trying to be rude here, but this is how and people like to call people casuals or noobs or whatever. This is how you know your friend is a casual. When you bring up AJ McKee, or you bring up Demetrius Johnson in Singapore, and they say, well, bro, until they fight someone in the UFC, we don't know how good they are. UFC is the best of the best. That's when you know your friend is a casual, because that's simply a logo. Rich, what were your thoughts on this?
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more. Look, obviously it's a promotional tool. But in reality, I think it's more of a relevant conversation for gyms. The promotion isn't training the fighter; the gyms are. So why couldn't that, somebody, be the best that's not in the UFC necessarily, or Bellator or PFL for that matter? It's to me, I always look at, where's this guy from and where is he training? Who is he training with? And that means more to me than what organization is he's with. And there's been times when there has been crossover. We've seen it play out. And you would think that by now people would remember, for example, the Strikeforce era, when all these guys left Strikeforce and went on to become UFC champions. What does that say about what we're doing at Strikeforce at the time?
Yeah, for sure.
Right? And then the guys,
Benson Henderson, Anthony Pettis, they all come over from the WC and win.
Yeah, there's several examples, so I think it's a promotional tool, a promotional vehicle. There's certainly promotional bias, and I get all that, but to me, why couldn't the best in the world, be at any other promotion? We've seen it play out as such, and again, I think it's more of a debate on where's the best gym in the world and who are these guys training with. What gym, what coach is producing the best guys? To me, that's more relevant than what organization has the best guys.
I'll give two examples that completely illustrate your point. Patricio Pitbull was the featherweight and lightweight Bellator champion, and Henry Cejudo was the flyweight and bantamweight champion, but Correct. They both weighed similar weights. They Correct. Trained together. They'd win minutes from each other. They'd win rounds from each other. They'd win positions from each other. They were very, very close. They trained together. Kayla Harrison trains with why am I forgetting the UFC champion's name? Not to be disrespectful. Featherweight and lightweight champion of the UFC.
Male or female?
Female.
Female. You said flyweight?
Yeah, she's at ATT with Amanda.
Yeah, Amanda.
Yeah.
I don't know why I couldn't think of Amanda's name for a moment, but just fatigue. But yeah, they win rounds off each other. They win minutes off each other. They win exchanges off each other all the time. Why would, but again, like, this is nobody's fault. A lot of the information we get how we get it. And the way we get information about fighting is through a corporate television program that sells their type of fighting. That's what we're going to believe, right? So it's nobody's fault. But of course, the best, and these days you can. So let's say you're a young genius of martial arts, and the UFC says, why don't you? And this is one of many routes. Come on, Dana White's Contender Series. We'll give you $5,000. If you win, you'll sign a contract. We'll give you $10,000. Or PFL can say, hey, if you win this, you'll win $1 million. You're 20 years old. You think you can beat them all? You go choose that. That in no way represents your ability. It represents your business choice, which is entirely separate than your ability.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to look at it from a different angle, and this example I'm going to use was solved a different way. Most people don't remember that football was separated into different conferences, and basketball was separated into different, and baseball. And the way they solved that was they say, we're going to merge onto one giant tent where you have the NFL. But I mean, that was their solution, because you had guys like Dr. J in the ABA where they could do things, and it was different. Most people probably don't remember that you could dunk in the ABA, and you couldn't even so much as pass the ball behind your back for the NBA. The NBA didn't think it was, but people loved all that flair, and they said, we're going to bring everything together, we're going to combine everybody, and now we got one thing in there. But also, to go back to your best in the world, we do that with our sports championship team, the world champions, NFL. Well, we don't have NFL everywhere else. It's not across the board. When we say, well, basketball, we are the best in the world. What happened a few Olympics ago with the United States? We didn't win.
Yeah.
So therefore, we are not the best in the world.
Hey, that's
we
wild.
It's Olympic losing. So what does that say?
So, and the argument would be because you got a bunch of talented individuals playing less well as a team was, I believe, at least the narrative. This is an interesting question, and it's meant as a theoretical question, but it's, hey man, theoretical questions are right up our alley. What if the best fighter in the world is not currently competing professionally at all? Well, it's a great theoretical question. The initial answer would be, then we don't know that they are the greatest. Right. However, there is undoubtedly a 16-year-old on planet Earth right now who will be better than almost every single fighter that is currently the champion. There's a 16-year-old that at 26 will be better than every fighter in the world right now. Rich, agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Theoreticals are always tricky.
Yeah.
Look, I have several examples of guys that have crossed over, and this is not theoretical, and had success and have not. I think I've seen enough and paid attention to enough guys that have made these moves, because I've been involved with them, to say that the best guy in the world can be anywhere.
Yep. So while we're on this topic of, now we go to the idea. So I will preface this by saying, I believe that even a belt, the title of champion, divisions, rankings, weight classes, and any type of categorization like this, to me, are almost entirely fabricated mechanisms used to sell things or create debate, which helps sell things. So that's my sort of overall agnostic view of it. But once we get to who's pound for pound the greatest, is it Brock Lesnar or is it Demetrius Johnson, if say they're fighting at the same time? I mean, how do you even do this? Is this even worth exploring in reality?
I think it's the same as, hey, with the 1965 Lakers beat the 1990 Lakers. I mean, you're comparing two different things all the time, because it's just an opinion piece. Where you look at Demetrius, who lost one fight in the UFC and then went to one. I think it was, well, he lost more than one.
He had lost
but in his
one
division,
or
he
two
lost
in
to Dominic
past.
Cruz.
Yeah.
But it's really hard to compare strength of opponent and someone. Like if someone gets really up there and you want to start a great argument, a bar argument is that someone will say, well, this guy beat 10 people in a row. And then someone goes and says, well, look at the records of this opponent that he, then you start to get into thing that's fuzzy like MMA math. Well, this guy beat this guy, so this guy could beat this guy. Well, that's never true.
Yeah. No.
So it's a good argument to have a good discussion in a bar, but it will lead to an argument, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Fun, fantasy, this goes hand in hand with goats and whatnot. And I know we'll get into that later, but pound for pound, I mean, in this case, yes, in this case, we're talking about skill, right? What we're saying is this person's skill set is the greatest. I mean, is that what we're saying here with pound for pound? How do you interpret pound for pound? I'm looking at everyone from flyweight to heavyweight, and I'm evaluating their skills. And I think the most skilled guy in this entire weight range is the number one pound for pound guy in the world. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah. First, we got to decide what we're actually saying.
Right. What are we saying? Right?
Are you comparing everybody? Are you comparing all the champions, or not necessarily because there are people on the list that are not champions, that they in that group that they could? This person would defeat everyone in that list, and I don't think you can say that.
So this is where I get into my bonkers thinking, but I feel like often this idea that we can create debate, right? We can create debate about a mask or about CNN or about fighting or about weight classes or whatever. We create a pound for pound list. We say who's the greatest of all time. We get people debating on Twitter. If you let yourself get tangled into that, maybe you can say it's fun, and to some degree maybe it is fun. But if the amount of time you might spend on that, which somebody is trying to stimulate the masses to behave in a particular way, which helps sell a pay-per-view or a pair of running shoes or whatever, and once you realize that's the game, you stop wanting to play the game. Right? I don't want to just take the action that a corporation wants us to take randomly as masses of people for the purposes of selling me shoes or pay-per-views. I don't know about everybody else, but at some point it feels like red and blue pills. Like if it isn't real, if pound for pound isn't real, if we don't even know what it really is, and we're going to spend time in our life debating it because we've been tricked into thinking that that's a good use of our time, I feel a little weird about that. I start feeling strange.
Yeah. I mean, let's you brought up Mighty Mouse earlier, Mallory, right? Mm-hmm. So Mighty Mouse, pound for pound, is a better fighter than Francis Ngannou.
So is that what we're saying? Exactly.
But if Francis was that size, how would he move different? Of course he would, but then he wouldn't be Francis. Like it just doesn't work, right?
If Mighty Mouse was 260. He'd be a totally different fighter.
Right.
That's the whole. I think that's what we're dissecting here, right? Is you're a smaller, faster guy without as much power. You're going to need to fight a certain way, and when you're Francis Ngannou and you have the most powerful punch in the game, I mean,
it's a different fight. You're not going to see Francis toss a fight up and grab an armbar, on the way down. But you see, that's one of the things that I think that just to tear that towards the flyweights for a second, I don't think they were appreciated in the UFC at one time for what they could do. You had two guys that were just lightning quick, and they moved at a different pace than everyone. But yet on the scale, the eyeballs usually go to the heavier fighter, and it's always been that way. Heavyweight match for boxing.
My simple observation, my dumbing it down even for my own, what's happening here? Often would find that I actually don't enjoy the heavyweights quite as much, although there is the one bucket over here, which is speed or flow or any of these things is reduced. What we all get is, holy shit, those guys are big, and when they hit each other, they fall down. And that's always compelling. But what you give up for that is you give up this sort of speed and movement. However, so somebody else, we might go, wow, look how incredible, 135-pound fighter flows. It's harder to track that with your eyes if you don't watch fighting all the time.
Right.
It's just a lot of stuff, right? Whereas if you do, that's a benefit. Where if you don't, that's a detriment. It's too fast. You don't really see it. It doesn't make as much sense. Whereas when Roy Nelson punches Frank Mir, I can see very clearly what's happening here.
Right.
To support the theory, for those of you out there who believe that smaller guys are better, they're more skilled. There's a trainer, I won't name him, but actually it's a team that they've trained a couple of some of the greatest heavyweights, and they've told me before, it is easier for us. This guy will be heavyweight champion. It is easier to become heavyweight champion than it is at a lighter weight. Now there's also another factor there being there are also way less people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Smaller pool. Right. Smaller pool.
Yeah.
But
two knockouts and two exciting knockouts, and you're fighting for a title often.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I have heard this from experts, masters of their craft and in the field that have said, hey, this is good. This is great. We got another heavyweight and he's going to be champ, when he's 8-0, just because the other guys, it's just easier. There's less guys to go through and they're not as good.
Yeah. So if we can't agree what pound for pound is, I promise we're going to have George St. Pierre pop on and hang out with us. And I thought about trying to get him today, but it'll make more sense when we've add a couple other platforms, Black Belt magazines, YouTube, and a bunch of other places where we are to bring George. But George will be the first to tell you, people like, you're the greatest of all time. And it's like, man, there's no such thing as that. That's not a real thing. He's like, the greatest. Someone can beat Khabib. And that guy can be beaten by somebody else. And that's true forever. I mean, and on a certain night, somebody pointed this. I was going to say it when Mal mentioned that loss of Demetrius, that Brad Pickett defeated Demetrius Johnson. Brad Pickett, I've commentated a bunch of his fights. I love Brad Pickett. His last fight that he had was in England in bare knuckle boxing, and I was there. He knocked the guy out, took his nose over here with a left hook. He's a great fighter, but he's on no one's pound for pound list currently, I don't think. And he beat Demetrius Johnson, who is, right? That's true for everybody. Matt Serra is a brilliant martial artist, and he was the UFC champion because he defeated George St. Pierre. And I love Matt Serra, but he's on no one's pound for pound list. And this is on and on. And I saw somebody, Khabib was kind of given side eye to somebody really good, and that person was like, hey, if Khabib kept fighting, he'd lose eventually too. And that is true. That is true. This is the dumbest of the lot for me, right, of the conversations.
I still remember boxing, and I'm going to take it back to when I used to watch it. Sugar Ray Leonard was from Maryland, and I used to have a big interest in watching Sugar Ray Leonard. I would ask my mom, because I couldn't stay up, I was too young, and asking her the next morning, did he win? Did he win? This, that, and the other. But in boxing that era, it seemed like if you had one loss, you were considered to be washed up. That's one thing that I do find that, like, for example, in MMA, someone may come to the first time, maybe a casual, somebody the first time, and they say, his record is 20 wins, 13 defeats. I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy's lost 13 times. Like, yeah, it happens. And he's still improving, and he's getting better. And, he's a more reformed fighter. I mean, how many people you see started out in MMA and they lost their first 3 or 4, or maybe even got cut, and then they come back and they're this whole new, and they're the comeback fighter of the year, a whole new fresh can of paint, a whole new set of skills. Who knows if all that's true, but yet they learned. It was a learning process, and just because that second digit is not 0 doesn't mean they're not a good fighter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely agree there, Mallory. Yeah, you're right. In boxing, their culture, I remember being around boxing guys. A prospect gets to 20-0 and then loses. It's like they're worthless. Everyone's so devastated. And then MMA, like when you said 20-13, I'm like, oh yeah, that's Nate Diaz, one of the biggest stars of the game, who's headlining, selling out arenas, packing arenas, and headlining shows. But Just a note on, see, GOAT. I almost feel like like we have to define greatness and what's great, because I feel like there's GOATs and there's boats. Best of all time and greatest of all time. There's a difference, and I think like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like greatest of all time, GOAT came up around like Ali, right?
Yeah.
Everyone acknowledged. There you go. Everyone acknowledged Muhammad Ali as the GOAT. But he's not even regarded as the best boxer of all time. Right? He's not. When you look at all the experts and those lists, and again, that's a whole nother debate, but he's not number one, right? But he's still the GOAT, because greatness, he's one of a kind, right? Like the era he was in, the things he accomplished, what he stood for outside of fighting, his greatness transcended sport. So perhaps we need to take another look at what greatest means. Is it the greatest, or is it the best?
That's a good point.
Than him, right?
Yeah.
But he's the GOAT because
he's the greatest.
A whole nother level. He transcended sport. He was a global icon. And on the MMA side, we have guys that who's the most, right now, the guy who's generated the most revenue and the most popular fighter ever is Conor McGregor.
Yep.
When you look at the top 10 pay-per-views of all time, he's got 7 of them or something like that.
Easily.
So if we're talking, is greatness measured by popularity and revenue? Is it measured, because I don't know. I'm just I'm just feeling like we need to define greatness.
Right.
Impossible to debate something if we don't even know what we're debating.
Right. Okay. Because Ali's not the best boxer of all time by all accounts.
How do you mean that?
He's the greatest, right? So who's the greatest MMA fighter and who's the best MMA fighter? Yeah. I don't know. That's
Chuck Liddell would be in the 5 biggest MMA fighters, but I saw him getting knocked out by Rich Franklin and Rashad Evans, and neither one of Rich might be, but so I'm going to just sidetrack this for a second. We were talking about sort of experts list and how we think. We don't know. We can't debate a pound for pound or a greatest because we don't even know what we're debating, and we go a step further even. Like, well, we have to decide, like, even what is expertise? Like, when we toss something to the crowd and say, hey, who's better, Canelo or Mayweather? This is a very unpopular statement. It shouldn't be. But the ability to assess high-level tech skill is in and of itself a high-level skill. Doesn't mean people shouldn't have an opinion on how good Mayweather or Canelo is, but if you're being truthful about it, the average person's opinion of Mayweather or Canelo is not the same as a 25-year boxing coach's opinion. And this doesn't matter for the world. We should be able to debate anything, but it matters for us understanding the world around us, understanding what we actually are really knowledgeable in or not knowledgeable in.
Yeah. Who's making these calls? Who are the experts? and I'm gonna make a Wimp to Warrior reference here. You know what I do and now and the company that I work for. If you guys may remember, I've always offered our training to media members because most of them don't train. A lot of the guys that are telling you, and this is no knock on them. This is just, it's for the most part, it's fact. Right. It's a fact that most of these guys do not train. They're passionate and they're great at writing. They're passionate about the sport, at writing. But if someone's telling me,
or talking, whatever their role is,
correct. But if you're telling me this is the next guy or this fight's gonna, go this way or that way, but you have no knowledge of the game and skills and can break down skill sets, like tell me how you get out of side control, how do you get out of mount? They have no idea, but you're telling me that this guy's the best guy in the world. Like at some point it matters that this has to be a criteria as part of your expertise, right? I'm not saying
it never will be. It never will be, sadly.
Right. And I've seen you debate guys, Robin, on this. Is like, I know, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you know nothing about, if you've never trained a day in your life and you don't know anything about martial arts or training or technique, it's very difficult for you to respect someone's take.
Yeah. Well, this is a weird one. And this is a nice one to be able to remove from just martial arts. This is true of science. This is true of politics. This is true of, most things. Currently, if you were a journalist for the New York Times, a political journalist for the New York Times, you will now rebrand yourself as the New York Times political analyst, right? Yeah. And there's a lot MMA journalists, 20-year MMA journalists, they'll now say, I'm an MMA analyst, but they don't actually know martial arts. Analyst isn't a role, right? Analyst is, we see it. You're on CNN, you're the CNN political analyst, that's your role. But that role exists for someone who is actually an expert in the thing. To imitate an expert and say the things that experts say really well or write them really well is not the same as actually being an expert. It's very different, right? Repeating, you can see that if you watch, say, fighting long enough, you'll see Joe Rogan or Daniel Cormier talk about rhythm, or they'll talk about timing, or they'll talk about distance, or they'll talk about slipping, or any one of these things. If you watch it long enough, you'll be able to identify, hey, that looks like that's a good time to talk about timing, or here, distance management, look at it. And you can say what Rogan or Cormier said at the same time as they said it. It's not the same as actually being an expert in the thing. Playing the role of an expert is not, and imitating the things that an expert said. Let me put this tightly. You cannot be an expert by simply reading or watching experts. Cannot be. We think we are. We all do believe that, most of my friends, not most, 60% of my friends currently think they are experts in infectious diseases. right? Like Facebook is full. Hundreds of thousands of people have expertise in infectious diseases because they saw experts on TV, and they may have consumed hours of their expertise on TV, and now they think they are experts. And it's the same thing. If you don't know how to do martial arts, you cannot truly be a martial arts. You are not a martial arts expert. You can be a talking or writing expert who have picked up ways to talk and or write, but if you don't do it, you don't know how to do it. You're not actually it.
I have a question for you. Do you think this was why some people kind of had a mini revolt when Stephen A. Smith was brought in to do a little bit of commentating?
Yes. So I will credit Stephen A. Smith as to what a guy like him, he understands. He's a hack. And I don't mean hack in the way that we say this. It's like he's a hack as in a journalist. People hack systems. And if you put Dominic Cruz at a desk to talk about martial arts expertise in an enthusiastic and well-spoken way, what you have is an analyst. If you put Stephen A. Smith there, he understands his job is not to do that. His job is to create debate, conflict, controversy, and he'll play his thing and he'll do it well. And when we get mad at Stephen A. Smith, he's doing his job. And I think he will. If you took all the cameras off and the three of us were hanging out with him at a sports bar somewhere, I think there will be times where he'd be talking to us like he was an expert. But I do think that deep down he understands that his expertise is at creating conflict, controversy, and debate. What do you guys think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you really have to understand, and this is where I put on my promotional hat.
Yeah.
And it's you have to see the big picture with a move like that. And we went through it in the early days when we were on network television with CBS with a guy like Gus Johnson.
Oh, yes.
Because what these figures do, Gus, Stephen A., they lend credibility to our sport in a way from the mainstream perspective, because these guys are calling and on the sidelines of the biggest sporting events, stick and ball mainstream sports here in America, right? I mean, I'm talking, big football games, basketball games, baseball games. And when these guys come into our world, it kind of lends that credibility that this is a big time sporting event. So where they lack in expertise, what they lack in expertise, I think they make up for as far as, what they bring with their presence, to give our sport credibility that we stand in that pantheon with these other these other sports. So I think where it goes wrong is when they double down on, when they disregard their strength, right? Kind of double down on their knowledge. That's when it's like you start getting called out and people start getting upset.
The good ones, good as in at their lane, like Stephen A. Smith, he understands the way I can build this up even bigger is double down on my shit. Just like, so you're not playing the same game if you are debating with Stephen A. Smith. If I went in and I was dumb enough to be, and I hope I'm not, but I have done this 3 times in the last 3 years, where just something, you're tired, you're hungry, you're exhausted, who knows what it is, and you get drawn into it. But if I did that with him, it'd be my mistake, because this is what he wants. He wants to double down and go, bro, I think I know I've been in this game for a long time. I think I know what Cowboy Cerrone was doing. And he's going to do his job, which is build up the sizzle, the clicks, the likes, the engagement. And I'm going to do mine, which is try to like get across the truth of the martial artistry, and the two of us are going to clash. I'm going to get stressed out and he's going to succeed at his thing. So it doesn't make any sense, right? Eventually you have to realize that he will win. If he keeps doubling down, he'll keep winning, right?
Random thought. Just a random thought. Does anybody remember the commentary team for UFC 1?
Jim Brown.
Yeah.
Jeff
I think you're right on that.
Yes.
Bill Superfoot Wallace.
Yes, right.
Kathy Long.
Yeah. Jim Brown, I remember yelling, "What happened?" when there was an armbar. What was that? That's cool. Like, how cool is that? Like, I mean, obviously Jim Brown was an expert in athletics and famous, so that's why he was there. But how cool would it be if something happened that Cormier or Cruz or any one of us that do those kinds of jobs, a moral, that we didn't even know what it was? Like, how cool would that be? Like, what has to happen? Right. Where you're just like, oh my God, like, I don't even know what happened. That's a very, very cool thing. Bill Wallace was a great kickboxer.
Fantastic kickboxer. Yeah. Nice.
We got to get Bill. Mal, do you know anyone that knows Bill
Jeff Smith knows Bill Wallace. I can work the connection angle from there. We got to get them off the golf course and off their motorcycles and sit them down to bring them on.
We'll pull out some of his footage and we'll ask him questions about the details of his footage. That would be super fun. Yeah. But yeah, expertise is a weird thing, and it's not a popular topic to ever. And there are people currently, you can become very good at debating and actually, quote, win a debate even without knowing the actual topic. And if you develop that skill rather than the skill of expertise, you will trap yourself in not knowing. Like, you will trap yourself. Knowing is to realize, to know anything, to learn anything is to begin with realizing how empty our cup is, and how much we could learn if we realized how little we know.
Well, guys, first of all, those guys that are great at arguing and debate, those are attorneys, right? But how did this whole, how did our conversation manifest itself is, it's the era of the hot take. It's the era of I know everything because we have technology, and just Google it. Right? Yeah. You got burnt on all that. Like, right, that's how we ended up here. That's how
you're right.
We're exhausted by all this, and we just wanted to just have an open dialogue and this conversation where we're not claiming we know it all, but let's just talk about, from different angles. And I feel like everyone out there now, you have to have that hot take, right? You have to be clear, have that clearly defined take to get people,
to get eyeballs, to get clicks, to get someone to get likes, etc.
There's one that now, let's say, I literally, and I use this, I brought this up, this was real. So on Twitter, I went and I said something about how I don't know anything about cars. I don't know anything about engines. And so my mechanic did something, and I'm like, my opinion about my engine is not equal to my mechanics. And people were like fighting with me. Yes, it is. Your opinion about your engine is as equal to your mechanics. I'm like, no, it isn't. He's a mechanic. He spent his whole life doing that. Then people would bring up, well, he could be trying to rip you off. And that's true. That is true. But he does know more about this than I. And then somewhere along the line, people would say that's an appeal to authority. It's a logical fallacy. And right there, we're in a lot of deep shit. If I must reject, if I will claim that there's a logical fallacy in rejecting the opinion of somebody with 50 years experience in something I have none, I'm screwed. I'm literally screwed. Like if I go into the gym, that's also why martial arts is so great. You can say all you want. You can look online and you can start a YouTube channel. You can debate Hickson. You can debate whoever you like. But if you go into the gym, it will be the thing that you say you know about martial arts. We will now know. Maybe that's one of the beautiful things about it. You cannot play game. You cannot invent these debate tools or build skills of debate that somehow prove things that are not true. You know. Although jiu-jitsu is in itself sort of a debate physically.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Look, if there's anything I've learned especially since being on the business side of it all, you know, everybody thinks they know fighting. Everybody has an idea of what's a great match and you know, how to train somebody. And perhaps it's just because everyone can actually fight. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like everyone can go out there and fight. You have 2 arms and 2 legs, as opposed to I'm short, I can't play basketball, right? I'm slower, I can play football, but everyone can fight, or can at least engage in training or engage in combat. And so everyone seems to take on this role of being an expert when they have no business, you know. They're just so like adamant, right? That they know what they're talking about. I meet these guys.
They believe it. They believe they do. They believe they do.
Hey, Rich, will it be a good fight? I don't know. Tell me.
Yeah, I know.
I saw a topic on Twitter this week, and I was getting ready. I had actually typed in my response, and then I thought about it before I submitted it, and ended up deleting it. But the question was, the Ninja Turtle Cup getting love. How long do you think you would actually last in the ring with an MMA fighter? And it was like, you know, most people were saying, oh, you know, 30 seconds, or it depends on how much getting paid and everything. But then I was like, that's kind of insulting to guys that train and this is their lifestyle. So I don't think I'm qualified to even answer that, even if I'm joking.
I mean, the truth is, if you have never fought anybody, the answer is, you know, 20 seconds or less. Right? You know, whoever you are, assuming it's a fairly similar weight class.
Right.
You know, this is an interesting follow-up question. What would make you an expert in MMA? What qualifies you? So we'll take this to any topic. Expertise is relative. So whoever has the highest level of expertise in the world is the expert compared to everybody else. Whoever has more expertise than people below that is it is a quantifiable amount. It is relevant. It is relative. I mean, there is no such. The greatest expert will be the first one to tell you they don't know everything, and they have so much left to learn. The experts lower on that scale will be quite certain they know a lot of stuff. But this again isn't a fighting thing, or a news thing, or a music thing, or a food thing. This is a life thing. Like if we're going through the world certain that we know a lot of shit, like if we're really smart, we know how the world works, we're in a lot of trouble. None of us know how the world works compared to what we would know if we studied it for 10 more years. None of us. With an open mind, with the ability to learn. You must start all knowledge that way. All knowledge begins with, I don't know much. And I remember, John Gooden is a very good friend, and I really like John Gooden. He's a smart guy, interesting guy, fun to talk to. And we were chatting in some podcast environment, and that was the same week Cub Swanson came out and said that journalists should have 3 fights, right? All journalists should have to have 3 amateur fights. Cub wasn't saying 3. Why not 5? Why not 2? Like he wasn't saying 3. He was trying to create debate. And Gooden, who is a martial artist, I believe he's a blue belt or a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. He's done a little bit of martial arts, more than 99% of journalists out there. he was like, well, that's not really fair, because if you did have 3, then people would say, yeah, but you don't have 5. And if you did have 5, they'd say, well, you don't have a professional fight. And if you did have a pro fight, they'd say you don't have a title fight. And I said, and he was right. And he was making a really smart, he wasn't arguing it. He was making a good point. And I said, well, John, you're illustrating the point. If at that point you still don't know much, then what the hell do you know now? You know what? And I mean, him, me, everyone else. If we would never get to the point that no matter how much we learned, we would still realize we don't know that much, that's illustrating how little we know today. It's reinforcing the point that we don't know anything. We don't know anything. And we don't know anything about almost anything compared to 100, 1,000, 12, 27 years from now, if we kept learning. But if we keep trapping ourselves in this position where we're sure that we know a lot about the world around us, we are trapping ourselves, and we are not going to be able to progress, and we're not going to be able to evolve, learn. It's a very spooky time in human existence because of that.
I wanted to bring up a quote I had heard, and this is a little bit different. It said, when Eric Clapton was asked by a reporter what it feels like to be the greatest guitar player in the world, he says, I don't know, ask Prince. But to also be able to recognize that, yeah, sure, I'm here, but I know there's a guy levels above me.
Of course.
And look, it also depends, what you're doing in this world, in the industry. Are you on the promotional side? Are you a coach?
Yeah.
Are you a trainer? Are you a media member?
Are you an artist?
Well, what makes you an expert? I think it really depends on what you're doing. It's we in the martial arts world, there are black belts, right? That's kind of like the gauge for reaching a certain level of knowledge, right? We all know this; it goes on forever, but you've reached a kind of a standard where you can be considered. Like, would you consider a black belt in any martial art an expert in that art?
Mm-hmm. I think you would if you were. They would be an expert to you if you were a white belt.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of it. It's also why we can bluff our way to being. If we are well spoken or good writers, we could bluff our way to being an expert in a lot of things, because all we have to do is know more than the people we're talking to and be really well spoken at doing it. So it's easy to claim that you are an MMA analyst even if you don't do martial arts, because all you have to do is know more than the audience hears. They'll have to recognize something, and you have to be good at speaking or writing or making videos or whatever. And that's, somebody said this, and of course this is a whole other thing, but public health, right? They said you can't bluff your way to the top in MMA. You can't bluff your way to the top in the physical aspect of sports, but you can in promotion, you can in commentary, you can in being a writer. Of course you can. All you got to do to bluff your way to the top is just appear to know more than the people that are listening to you. That's how cults are created, right? Like, you can do it quite easily. People do it all the time. Jimi Hendrix was asked the same and said, I don't know, ask Rory Gallagher.
Well said.
Yeah. You do not have MMA black belts, do you? Just individual disciplines. That's a whole other conversation for another day. And we've touched on it, and it will be something we will definitely touch on more in the future. But MMA is a rule set. There's no martial art called MMA. Right. If and when there is one, that's to its detriment. It becomes doctrines, dogmas, belief systems. The sport of mixed martial arts is a rule set. And this, you go down this rabbit hole with people and they don't necessarily want to go with you, but it's the same with boxing. There's no such thing as boxing. Boxing is simply learning to fight in a structured environment where you can use only your hands, move your feet in a certain way, with certain rounds, with certain timing, with certain rings. Yes, I do know that we train to do a certain thing and you train in particular ways, but all of that training is just set to be able to win contests in this environment. Fighting is fighting. And there's no such thing as jiu-jitsu. There's no such thing as boxing. There's no such thing as MMA. It's just fighting in particular rule sets and environments. Do you guys think I'm crazy?
No.
It's okay if you do.
Yeah, I love it. I'm here for more.
Yeah, this is fun. We've been winding down around 90 minutes lately. Anybody have any other thoughts, questions, ideas? Please send them in the next 5 or 10 minutes. What else? Anything else kind of trips you guys been on this week?
I'm in relatively stationary. just.
I mean, mental trips.
Mental trips?
Say physical or mental?
Yeah, mental.
What was I thinking of earlier? Hold
on. So the Greek term pankration, I don't know the literal translation, but basically the Greeks really appreciated the art of combat, not just the violence of it. The Romans appreciated the violence. The Greeks appreciated the chiseled bodies, the telling of stories with physicality. And so in the Olympian, they had wrestling and they had boxing, and then pankration was you can do all that stuff. Although I'm not judging the Greeks or anybody else who likes human bodies the way they like them. They also made them do it naked. I don't know why. That was just what you're not allowed to wear any clothes in pankration.
Wait, you guys don't train like that at your place?
That's the number one rule. No naked training. That is
no naked training. Yeah, it's one of the few rules in most places I've been. But yeah, pankration was just boxing and wrestling. You could sort of do everything. And you got to put a name on something because we're humans. We make sounds with the shape of our mouth and our vocal cords and stuff. So you call it pankration, you call it MMA, you call it boxing, but it's just what it is. That's like saying, there's really no such thing as punk rock or jazz or hip hop. And I know people who love those things will be mad at me. It's just music, right? You're just making music. You give it the category, you give it for the needs you have to sell things, collect things, put things into boxes, but it's just music.
Yeah. An interesting note on pankration in Hawaii, the early days to get it approved. It was originally, this fighting was originally approved under pankration rules. So that was kind of the loophole to get it through, was calling it pankration. It wasn't, I don't even think MMA was a thing yet, right? It was cage fighting and whatnot.
No holds barred.
No holds barred.
Yeah.
There are no rules. Yeah. Exactly.
Pankration that, at least in Hawaii, helped push it through by a guy named Chou.
When you were in Hawaii during that period, did you come from Guam and then move to Hawaii, or was it the other way around?
From Guam, I went to Southern California. I went to college in Malibu. And that's kind of where my jiu-jitsu journey started in some ways. Going back to the Hickson book, Hickson lived in the area and had an academy in Pacific Palisades. And that's kind of where my attraction to jiu-jitsu, and he was my first jiu-jitsu hero. That's kind of where it all started. So that's like late 90s or so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
God,
I want to ask a follow-up question. Rich, what was the original what was it that attracted you to jiu-jitsu? It was like, hey, this seems cool, or I saw it somewhere, or what was the original?
Oh, I saw it in the UFC, just like a lot of other people in '93. And then just always thought, man, that's so cool. I want to learn. Just fascinated with hoist as well, but just Hickson did it with such style. And I used to watch Choke like once a week, and we used to try and emulate the breathing. We used to jump into cold water. We were such dorks. Still am, like. But just, you know what? I trained with a buddy of mine who was much smaller, and he armbarred the shit out of me, man. I knew nothing. And this little guy was dominating me. And I just thought to myself, I need to learn this stuff. This is the shit. This is awesome. And, we have our moment where we fell in love, right? With whatever art we decided to focus on. And for me, it was just enjoying the fact that here's something that if a little guy can do it to me, and I'm a bigger dude, and if I learn it, and it was never to be a bully or dominate anyone. It was just the fascination with the art.
Fascination with the art itself.
Yeah. And just the whole lifestyle. I just thought it was really, really, it was really some really, really cool stuff. Because prior to that, I had been a jock my whole life. I played volleyball in college at Pepperdine. It was a great program. Played basketball, like all these traditional stick and ball sports. And then I discovered martial arts later in my life, 18.
Did you surf too around that time? That was part of the same culture, right?
Yeah. Picked up surfing shortly after. And it's just amazing how those two, like you said, it's the same culture, they flow, and just the expression and creativity that you can do in both of those, having your own identity and style, things we constantly talk about here. I guess at the end of the day, I'm really attracted to those things, and that's why I love surfing and training and martial arts so much for that.
Yeah, this connects now to what we were talking about too, kind of the beginning. So, and it connects to what we've been talking about for a few weeks. This idea of old is new again. This idea of, this sort of this corporate stagnation or commercial stagnation that's kind of happening. Partly bare knuckle. So I'm commentating Jorge's show October 1st. I think it's on the BKFC app, but it's probably in other places as well. Jorge Masvidal wanted to start his own MMA promotion, and he's like, we ain't wearing gloves. I was training bare knuckle yesterday with wraps with one of my coaches, Evan Boris, and I was doing it to kind of put myself into kind of the mindset, knowing that this is where my focus will be when I'm commentating those fights. I want to be able to commentate on the little details and some aspects that people might not think about. And you find that there are times not subconsciously that you're holding back when you throw punches without gloves. And of course, when you go to punch with your forearm engaged, the harder and more committed the punch, it creates the engagement in your body and it stabilizes the weapon. If you hold back ever so slightly, it actually causes a little fragility and you'll do more damage to yourself. So through committing, you'll do better. And these aspects, these little psychological aspects are interesting, but they're not new. People are like, oh, I love this bare knuckle stuff. This was the beginning. This was, why would we wear gloves? It's no holds barred. Why on earth would we be wearing gloves?
What you did one of those before at Jorge's promotions, right?
Yes, I did his first show.
Did you find that there were a lot of guys in the back that were like, "Oh man, I broke my hand," or I'm wondering what the fallout would have been.
So I commentate about it's got to be 3-4 years now, 8 or 9 a year, just bare knuckle boxing out of England. And so sometimes I'm there at the O2 Arena in London where they have it. And man, the hands are worse than the faces, almost always. Yeah. And then I did there were 2 bare knuckle fights on an MMA show in Wyoming that I did, I don't know, a month and a half ago. My wife came down and then we drove around South Dakota, went to like, that town, that western town they made a series on.
Tombstone.
Deadwood.
Yeah,
and it was great. But I saw the 2 guys after, and one guy, and he won inside of 2 minutes, and his hands were just ruined. And if you go to Paige Van Zant's, she, her couple of fights, and she'll hold them up. They're worse than the face. These weapons are fragile, man. Yes. When we decided to protect the weapon, the more you protect the weapon, the more punches you end up taking. And it's I don't believe it's any longer, debated. I think we know that the bigger gloves will cause more subconcussive trauma to the brain. And the smaller gloves, you hit less. These are fragile. You got to be much more precise with your picking your shots.
Yeah, absolutely. When you look at a 12-round fight and you look at the stats at the end and how many shots a guy ate, and sometimes it's crazy. Whereas Robin, like you said, you kind of pick and choose in bare knuckle. And a promotional note, the promoter in me sees bare knuckle and says, I get why you're doing this, because you almost have to go the route of creating a new sport, right? Old is new, bringing back time, because when I think bare knuckle back in the day, I think of like, when they used to come out like this, like Marcus of Queensberry rules or whatever it was, right? I chose to a fight under these.
You gotta have the handlebar mustache.
Yeah, and the handlebar mustache, right? And so I see these guys, and I'm like, all right, old is new. Yes, we talk about that a lot, but also I need to do something different. We also talk about identity a lot, because what am I going to do? I'm going to come in and I'm going to compete with the UFC, Bellator, PFL, and one.
Yeah.
Or do I create one thing, right? As far as my brand and identity. And I understand why people are going that route more, because it's kind of easier to create a name for yourself, as opposed to trying to jump in this fray of high level MMA with, that's backed by investors and corporations. And yeah, you might as well go this route. I understand that from a promotional standpoint. I get it. Like, hey, smart move. You're probably have more longevity and sustainability doing something different than to just compete in the MMA space.
For sure. It's full. I was talking about committing to those punches to like actually reduce the likelihood of the instability causing damage. And look at Nito here going full philosophy on us. Commitment causes stability in striking and in life. You know, hey, certainly, you know, there's a lot always to be learned. And when you are decisive, often it does make life easier. You know, while we're talking about the errors of believing you know so much and it prevents you from learning, the error of spending so much time deciding, like, should I watch, you know, Amazon Prime or should I watch Netflix? And if I'm watching it, should I watch a documentary or should I watch that? Oh, maybe I'll watch that again. Those hours are gone forever. Those hours are gone forever. Analysis paralysis. You start worrying. What if I'm watching something and then I'm not watching this other thing and I lose that? But you're watching currently nothing while you are being indecisive. Right? You're sitting there. You gave up 2 hours and you didn't watch anything. You just surfed it. And that decisiveness is very, very, very powerful in a world of indecisiveness. Just like the truth is very powerful in a world where everybody's fronting and posturing and speaking in code, you know? But what do we got here? You guys are great. Oh, thanks, man. So yeah, I don't know. This was a really fun one. Really fun. I think next week is maybe time for us to get a guest. What do you guys think?
I'm all for that.
Time?
Yeah, I think it's time.
All right.
I think it's time. I think I should ask Boss. Don't you?
Ooh, Boss would be great.
Ask Boss.
Oh man.
Yeah. Either Boss or George. I'm gonna ask. I'll ask George first because it's George St. Pierre. I'll ask George first if he'll, or maybe both. Maybe both guys will come and hang for 15 or 20 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be something. We got to step our game up, boys.
Yeah, we got to step our game next level now.
Yeah. If you listen to this on audio, because we might not get this one up on audio. All this stuff takes time, and if we have anything worth exploring, it's because we're busy doing interesting things, and that's life. But if we do get this up on audio and you did listen, please hit us up on Twitter and tell us, you know, what worked and didn't work without the video. And we'll expand this more. The whole point was to hang out and let it happen. A lot of you guys have been on since week 1, which is really cool, super cool. But yes, I'll ask George St. Pierre if he wants to pop on with us next week. If he's too busy, then we'll ask Boss. Boss, sorry, you're not second choice. I just randomly chose George first. Maybe we should choose Boss first, now that I've said that. I don't know.
Analysis paralysis.
Yes, good point. I actually have the 2 of them and Lyoto Machida in the same group text. So, because all 3 work for Karate Combat with me. So I will text George St. Pierre, Boss Rudin, and Lyoto Machida all simultaneously and say, which one of you guys wants to come on my podcast?
That's a win either way.
Mallory and Rich.
You know?
Yeah, it's a win no matter what.
It's a win no matter what. That's great.
Pick your poison, huh? That's
Yeah.
I'm all for it.
Yeah, awesome. Any last thoughts? We'll definitely next Thursday I fly to Biloxi for that, and then I go to Amsterdam Levels Fight League. Oh, so I don't know. I think I'm allowed to say this. Levels Fight League. This is LFL 3, which is so. Rich, you're talking about in the promotion part of MMA. You know where there actually is just not much happening in MMA. And I'll tell you, not you, but our viewers, why this is a good thing, is mainland Europe. There's fight shows in Ireland and in England, but there isn't much in mainland Europe. And the reason that it's actually, although we all compete with the same places on the internet, the reason this is a powerful thing is because there's all these fighters on mainland Europe that want to fight, right? So I'm pretty sure I'm allowed to say this, but Mertel Gronhart and Jason Wilness, both of them are like the highest level of kickboxers. Wilness will be fighting a second MMA fight, and Mertel is first. And Mertel's a genius, absolute genius of kickboxing. But anyways, let's try to get together next Wednesday before I jump on a plane. What's up with Wimp to Warrior, Rich? What are you working on?
Man, we are doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes, working on a big rebrand, working on setting things up really to just come out of the gate strong in 2022. So it's quiet at the moment operationally here in North America, my territory, but we are doing a lot behind the scenes to really, really come out and make a big impact early next year. So as we move forward with this project, I will certainly keep you guys posted. But again, just for those who are tuning in for the first time or need a refresher on what Wimp to Warrior is, we are bringing martial arts training to the masses, and we are presenting it in a way that's really friendly for the average person, because that's who we're targeting. We're not looking for the next big fighter. We are challenging people that are looking for something in their lives to kind of get them out of a rut. Give them some confidence. To me, it's just as much mental as it is physical, learning this amazing thing that we all love called martial arts, but we all also understand the power of what it can do for you mentally and spiritually. So, that's what we're trying to achieve here. Bring it to the masses, get everybody training, because I do believe if more people trained, the world would be a better place. So
no doubt. Mal, are you able to be moving your body and punching and kicking these weeks?
Yes, sir. I've actually got I plan to go up to my instructor school, which is that's going to be on Sunday. Actually, was contacted by an old black belt friend of mine. He's got some up and coming kids. I've been training them on Friday, which has been great. We've been reviewing some film and footage. It's always great when they're like, "You fought Raymond Daniels?" Like, yeah, I fought Raymond Daniels. It's great, I said, I lived to survive and everything. But it's also great because these kids are hungry. They want to learn more and everything. So that's been fun to do on Fridays, and on Sundays I'll go up and get some training myself. It starts to me. It starts the week off right. It's really weird that you can go and punch and kick. And then for me, it sets me up to write code for the rest of the week. And I feel like I'm thinking a whole lot more clearer.
Yeah, those two things work really well. Tywin Claxton talks a lot about that MMA fighter. Now, have you ever, just for fun, been like, yeah, I fought Raymond Daniels. Do you see the thing where he spun around and punched the guy? That was me.
It's every once in a while someone will say, did I actually see that of you? Like, yeah, Raymond, we were fighting for a Rolex over here in Virginia. And I lived to tell the tale. I didn't become a glory highlight or a Bellator highlight or anything else like that, which is very fortunate. But what a great guy to train with. Fun, great dude. Hang out with. What t-shirts? I got the greatest of all time for me.
Yeah. Rich, you got Wimp to Warrior.
Yeah.
Company. Yeah.
Yep.
I got the greatest of all time.
Is that Roxanne?
That's Roxanne Modafferi.
She is so cool, man.
Yeah.
Roxy.
Yeah. Actually, let me tell you, we talked about what is a martial artist the other week. I don't know if Roxy will see this. I'll maybe clip it for her. But Roxanne Modafferi is a martial artist, man.
Mm-hmm.
I was at Madison Square Garden and she fought. She had a bad night. And I remember seeing people on the internet going, who is this chick fighting Madison Square? She got tuned by this girl. And I'm looking at these and sitting, and it was on Twitter. And I know we don't all get it, and we're all off on our own trips. And I'm looking at it, I'm going, how on earth are these people missing the whole point? How are they missing the whole point? Roxanne, I started commentating her fights in like 2012, bits and pieces from Japan. She was a regular person, as we all are regular people. Mm-hmm. And she trained martial arts. She learned slowly. It was hard work. She lost a lot of fights in Japan. And she worked and worked. I'm going to pull it up. She worked and she worked and she worked, Roxanne, and got better slowly, man. And this is no disrespect. It's a compliment. And one day, there she is, fight is in Madison Square Garden. And I'm like, if you can't see the beauty of this regular comic book nerd who picks up and goes to Japan and slowly does everything that has to be done until one day she achieves fighting in Madison Square Garden, and you're mocking that, you're missing the boat. Like, you're missing the point of life. But I look, it's all these Japanese fights, and I was calling many of them after the fact, or recalling. She fought Tara La Rosa, Shayna Baszler, Yabushita, Marlos Kunin, who's a genius, truly a genius. Tara against Sarah Kaufman, Rosie Sexton, Barb Horshak, Raquel Pennington, Tara again. She fought everybody, and slowly made her way up until she was fighting in the UFC, and then beating a Macy Barber, who everyone's talking about. Like that's the path. How many fights are we looking at now? We're looking at 25 wins and 18 losses in 43 matches, dating back to 2003. If you don't understand, the path is long, winding. There's setbacks. You learn, you improve, you get better. To this day, she's the last one on the mat. She'll clean the mats. Like, she's everybody's training partner. She'll work her ass off. That's what a martial artist is.
She teaches kids. She teaches kids classes in Vegas. I know. I worked with her. She's awesome.
Yeah.
I second that. I double down on that. Roxy is a true martial artist.
Yep. These are the examples when we're sitting there kind of, judging the guy who how Poirier did against Khabib from our couch. The people to watch are the regular humans who, through trial and error and setback and failure and self-improvement and loss and slowly build the life the hard way. How many did we say? 43?
Yeah, 43.
43 professional fights all over the world. And one day she's fighting in Madison Square Garden, and people, and again, I'm not judging them. We all have different reasons for thinking and seeing the world the way we see it. But you're sitting there going, oh man, that girl sucks. It's like you're missing, if you can't see this, you're missing some of the real trick to having a good life. Watching Roxy navigate the hardest sport in the world from white belt to Madison Square Garden is
all with a smile on her face.
That's how you live life. That's how you're supposed to live. That's what we're supposed to see that as a lesson of how to, not a thing to mock,
100%. Absolutely 100%.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So thanks for asking. But I'm sure you can get your Roxanne Modafferi shirt somewhere on her website or Instagram or something. But she's the best, man. She's the best. Any last words?
I think we're the big tease is to see where we go next week. So that lead off.
Yes, I will get us it'll be a group text to Leona, George, and Boss, and whichever one jumps up first, that's who we'll have.
I love it. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you, Black Belt.
Yep. Oh, somebody said, how can you watch this on YouTube? Currently on YouTube, it's on my YouTube channel, Black Belt Facebook, and Sport Martial Arts Facebook, and a bunch of other places. Mal, you're going to follow up and see to get so we can feed it to Black Belt Magazine's YouTube?
Yes, we're still working on getting that plugged in. Hopefully by next week, we'll have all that working. But we do it over our Sport Martial Arts at our YouTube page, our Facebook page, our Twitch page, which I'm actually surprised we have one,
Oh, cool. But yes, follow Black Belt Magazine on Facebook. There's hundreds of thousands of people there. Follow and like them too. That's what made us start to go, hey man, like when we were kids, we were like, we could have a podcast on if I said to Rich and Mallory, one day we'll have a podcast on Black Belt Magazine YouTube, they'd be like, what's YouTube? What's a podcast?
I will tell you something really cool that you made me think about what happened last week. I got a call on Sunday from my dad, and my dad said, hey, I caught your show. And I said, which one's about? This is the one where you guys were talking about. Is MMA a sport? And I hadn't told him. I forgot to tell him that this. So eventually my dad will wander around to this. If not live, he'll get to it between here and there. So hi, Dad. Love you. This is always great. The reason why I started martial arts is because of him. But it's when my dad calls me, and I didn't say to him, prompted, I watched every minute of your show. Loved it.
Is your dad's name Mallory as well?
Same. That's where I get my name from.
Well, Mallory Sr., nice to meet you, sir. And everybody else, thanks for hanging. And we will see you next Wednesday. Please like, share, whatever. And I'll share the audio links if people want to listen to it again. And we'll be back. Let's all grow this thing. Just a bunch of martial arts nerds. Indeed. Enjoy the hostilities.
Thanks, boys.